and welcome to another edition of the One Drink Book Club. Today's book is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. Demon Copperhead tells the story of a smart and charismatic boy growing up in southern Appalachia who is constantly dealing with poverty, drug addiction, abandonment, foster homes, and death. My guest is David Lyles, a good friend who is a big reader, as well as a boater, bike rider, and former chief of staff to a longtime senator from Michigan. Thanks for joining me, David.
My pleasure, Jamie.
So reading David Copperhead, or Demon Copperhead, I kind of did a slip there because referencing David Copperfield, which it was kind of based on by the author. You recommended this to me in a Facebook post. Tell me why you liked this book, because I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great suggestion.
Well, Jamie, maybe you remember I'm about snake phobic, so to think that I would enjoy a book with the word Copperhead in the title is a little strange, especially since we have a lot of copperheads on the side of the mountain I'm living on right now. But anything that Barbara Kingsolver writes is going to be a good book. I'd read 4 or 5 of her books before Demon Copperhead. I read several more afterwards. She's a tremendous, tremendous writer. And I guess the thing that struck me most about Demon Copperhead, Jamie, was we all heard about the opioid epidemic in this country and what it was doing to rural America. But this book brought that home to me more than any newspaper article or any news report. It really brought home to me how damaging it was to small town rural communities, and also, I kind of wondered as I'd see these huge settlements from some of the pharmaceutical companies. I wondered what was their liability here. She puts very clearly what their liability was.
Yeah, I thought she did a great job of not being necessarily preachy about it from a public policy standpoint, but you put the nail on the head. She put real stories and real examples of how people were just taken advantage of by the system and by even the way that the Medicare and Medicaid and disability had all played into kind of the growth of these things. And so I agree. And it was interesting for me. I grew up in a small town. It wasn't Appalachia, but it was a smaller town, and I knew people from small towns in the Midwest. And I thought it did a very good job too of kind of describing how different life was and entertainment was, and if you live in a big urban place, you have access to a lot more distractions. And in these smaller towns, the Shell station is the place people gather because they don't have any restaurants, or they're
Right.
very limited on those things. And so I thought she played a really, she did that very well. And I don't know about you, but I Googled, Lee County and did it on Google Maps to see where it was and try to place some of those things.
It's in Southside Virginia, I believe.
Yeah. And it's only about an hour south of Blacksburg. And, my daughter went to Virginia Tech, so I've been to that area quite a bit. But it was almost shocking to me that place was within a 5-hour drive of where I live.
Right.
It just seemed like a world away, but it's not far away at all.
No. There was one scene she described where where Demon and his girlfriend went to a clinic, and everybody in the parking lot was trying to swap and get some drugs. It was haunting. It really was, to see people were so desperate to do this. That
did you read Empire of Pain, which
No.
was kind of the story of Purdue Pharma? Great book. It was done by the Wall Street Journal reporter who kind of broke the story. And
Empire of Pain.
Empire of Pain.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so disturbing, and it goes into the Sacklers and the family and their decisions. And one of the things that was clearly obvious in the book, but then she really spelled it out with that pain clinic that everybody was lining up in front of, which was kind of run by a sham doctor who was just
Yeah. Yeah.
sitting there prescribing pills, pills, pills for everybody who walked through the door. And it just goes to show that Purdue Pharma was shipping him these pills. They knew that this guy was writing whatever thousands of prescriptions
It
a
was
week. And for them to claim later that they had no idea that these were being abused or that this was happening was just obviously bunk. Like,
exactly.
they know it.
But Jamie, we're caught up in the story of the opioid uh, catastrophe, but the description of the foster child situation in the county was pretty harrowing too.
Yeah, one of the things in this book, there are plenty of villains to go around in the book, but there's also some real positive people who care. But the foster system and the people in it just seemed despicable. I think one of the people I hated the worst was Mr. Crickson, which was kind of this farmer who lived by himself and was using the boys sent to him as pretty much slave labor.
Exactly. Yeah. And not giving them decent meals or a decent place to live.
Well, and he went to another family too that did the same thing, where they were practically starving him.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't profitable for them to have him and then feed him too.
Yeah.
It was so sad to see that, and I think Kingsolver tried to pin some of it on the fact that the system was privatized to some degree, but I'm not fully convinced one way or another, whether it was private or government, that it would be much better one way or another.
Right.
But it really is a shame. I hope there are good foster parents out there. I know that there probably is, but
I know some. I know some in Arlington. I knew some in Arlington, Jamie. There are really, really wonderful foster parents out there. But in the rural community that where this took place, I don't think there was the oversight from the social workers that there needed to be. I'm sure they were stretched way too thin.
Yeah.
And so they really couldn't keep track of what they needed to keep track of.
And there was one scene in it where Demon was telling his social worker about the abuses at one of the houses. And she said, well, those two boys that are being, whipped and abused aren't under her company or her jurisdiction. So like she couldn't do anything about it. But it was, it just seemed crazy that if you had a kid telling you, hey, this stuff is happening, this abuse is happening, and you're the social worker, that you don't do anything about it.
I think I told you that that the nice thing about a Kindle is when you find something you like, you can just leave it there and come back to it. And I do that with the last 3 or so pages of the book, where they're driving to their Angus says, let's drive to the ocean and show it to you. And he suddenly realizes, good Lord, the girl has set her cap, not my sister.
Oh yeah,
all that he had gone through in the book to finally come to that realization. It was just heartwarming. I kind of wondered, that's not the first time that phrase was used in the book. The girl has set her cap, because remember, it was somebody he was living with, and she told Demon, I think that girl has set her cap.
I think it was
Demon thought it was somebody else.
Yep. That was his Betsy Woodall, I think.
Yes.
His grandmother, his paternal grandmother said
that's
that.
Right.
And,
that's
and
right.
He did think it was somebody else. And so, and that was the thing I liked about it, because there were parts of the book that I found really hard to keep reading on, because you saw him spiraling in this addictive funk. And when he went to live with his girlfriend who was addicted, and you knew this was not going to turn out well.
Right.
And I found, if I had one complaint about the book, is that I thought it was maybe a little longer than it needed to be, because I just felt so depressed about his situation. But it did end in a way that was inspirational. I don't want to give away the ending, but it felt, you felt good at the end, and you felt
Yes,
like
you did. You did.
he had come through the storm. But man, it was rough there for a while.
And the amount of time that he had to spend in rehab or under supervision um, was I mean, it takes that long to get off the stuff, I guess.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I read Empire of Pain, and I had some medical procedure not long after that, and they gave me some Oxycontin.
Yeah.
And I flushed it down the toilet. I didn't take any of them because I was so scared. I thought, after reading a book like this or Empire of Pain, you don't want to touch it. Like, it's crazy.
Yep. Right.
What a blight on society.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, speaking of addictions, I have not covered what my cocktail was for tonight. Um, and this was a little tough to come up with an inspired cocktail because they don't, I mean, they drink in the book, but there's not like something that was obvious. So I actually invented a cocktail because I was trying to think, all right, Appalachia, small town, hillbilly esque. So I started with what I thought was the perfect base, and that is Mountain Dew. So I had, this is Mountain Dew, vodka, a little bit of grapefruit juice, and then a cherry, because I feel like Dory or some of the women in the book would like, kind of a fancy drink. I didn't have any umbrellas for it, but and I'm calling it the Lee County Cooler as my cocktail for tonight.
Well, congratulations. Very appropriate.
I thought about putting a little Splenda on top, so it would look like crushed Oxy, but I thought that was probably a bridge too far.
Right. Right.
And the Mountain Dew was sweet enough on its own. Well, like I said, there were a lot of really heartwarming characters that did at least try to help Demon out throughout the book. Who were some of your favorite people who were the good influences in his life?
Well, I think the best person in the book, the one that appealed to me most, was Angus.
Yeah.
She kind of never lost faith in him. She stayed in contact with him. And there were others. Well, Angus's father he was a little too wedded to football.
Yeah, although he did provide the most stable home
That's
that
true.
he experienced, and the fact that he could have all he wanted to eat, and that seemed horrible to me, to be constantly worried about your next meal. But I thought the Peggotts in general were a really great family. Aunt June and Grandma Peggott. They also provided a structure for Demon and showed him what family actually looked like, since he had really no examples on his own side.
Even if he didn't like her, her oysters.
Right. But I think one of the most heartbreaking parts of it was when he was looking for a home, and he broke down and asked Grandma Peggott if he could live with them. And when she had to tell him no, and it was for, obvious reasons, they were getting old. They just didn't have what they could, but it was just a heartbreaking conversation where these were the only people he knew who were parental to him, and them kind of rejecting him made you just, ugh. I mean, it was really tough to see that, or read that scene, or hear that scene. As I listened to this book, and the narrator did an incredible job of the dialects and the voices and everything else. I've grown to really appreciate good voiceover talents for these books, and she did a great job. Another question I had, some of the things I really liked about Demon was the author's ability to have Demon make observations, and some of, like, some of his phrases, which I thought were great, his skull movies and things like that. And I was so impressed at her ability to also write his dialogue and even his thinking, both as a small child and growing up,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
changing it as it happened.
Right, right.
Um, and I just read
She's such a gifted writer. Yeah.
unbelievable, and like this motivated me to read the Poisonwood Bible, and in there she did the same thing where there was lots of children at different ages and parents, and her ability to get in their head, and whether it's their internal dialogue or their external dialogue, make it seem age appropriate and
Right.
also insightful. Whereas I find some writers, their characters' observations are so deep that I think, well, nobody thinks like that. Nobody, but hers seems so natural. It's so impressive. Have you read other Kingsolver books?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I've read the Poisonwood Bible is one of her earlier ones. But I kind of went on a kick of reading some of her books, and I'll just call some of them up for my Kindle here. Prodigal Summer, Pigs in Heaven. I enjoyed Pigs in Heaven a lot. Bean Trees, and I read the Poisonwood. The Poisonwood Bible was it's about 20 years old, isn't it, Jamie?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Missionaries in Africa.
correct, correct.
It was a little brutal in some places.
Yeah, and then Kingsolver actually lived in that area of rural Virginia for a while, and also lived in Africa.
Oh, really?
Um, so
Oh, I knew that. I knew that.
she wrote some of that stuff, kind of not firsthand, but at least had a real, you know, grip on what she was writing about there.
Right, right,
Didn't just come out of her head. Um, so I just thought, and I think the Poisonwood Bible also was an Oprah book early on in the Oprah Book Club world, which
really.
can really make or break an author, depending on what Oprah says.
There's several I look for. That Reese Witherspoon, if she endorses a book, I'm going to be interested in it because it's going to be good. Same way with Oprah.
Yeah. Um, and which is, I think, is great. I love to see authors get that kind of exposure, especially if it's a first book or they're an unknown author, because I
Right.
think it's a real challenge to get exposure for these,
Mhm,
for a
mhm.
new book. There's so
Sure.
many out
Sure.
there. One of the things that's been fun about doing this podcast is that I've started to get book publicists sending me books.
Books.
Uh,
Is that
yeah, I keep telling them, well, this is not a big operation here,
yeah.
but it's been fun, and I've done a couple first time authors where I've actually had the author on,
That.
and then some. I will talk about it later, but one of my favorite authors is Amor Tolls, who wrote A Gentleman in
Oh
Moscow.
boy, yeah. I would be glad to talk about Amor Tolls. A link.
Well, his new book is coming out in April, and I just read it. I got an advance copy. Um,
What is it, Jamie?
so it's called A Table for Two, and actually I have it right here. It is. I can't really talk about it until it gets published,
And,
but I will tell you it's really good, and that you will
you know,
enjoy it.
I that there were three books of Amor Tolls I read. The first one was A Gentleman in Moscow. I don't know if you want to talk about this,
Sure,
but
sure.
A Gentleman in Moscow, which I was not that impressed with.
Funny.
Um, but then I read The Lincoln Highway, and I just thought that was a wonderful, wonderful story. The other one was what's the about growing up in
Rules
the
of Rules of Civility.
Rules of Civility, which I also thought was excellent.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's funny.
I remember I drove from here in Western North Carolina. I drove to Detroit to speak at the memorial service for my boss, Senator Levin, and I remember driving under the Lincoln Highway, and there's a sign on the bridge that says the Lincoln Highway.
Yeah, I thought that was fantastic. I've loved them all, and I have a special place for the Gentleman in Moscow. But all
Really?
of them I thought were good. and just great characters, good storytelling, um, and I think my least favorite was Rules of Civility. But I recently went back and reread that and liked it a lot more the second time.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so so that is fun. Well, what other things are you reading late, or have you read lately that you suggest?
Well, let me, Jamie, there are a couple. If you like Barbara Kingsolver, you'll like Lee Smith. I don't know if you know who Lee Smith is.
I don't think I have read anything. Okay.
Um, Lee Smith is she, she's a, she grew up in Southside Virginia. And the two books I would recommend most are Fair and Tender Ladies, an early one by her, and the blue. I've got to get this off my shelf. Hold a minute. Jamie, this is one, if you have an hour flight, you could pick it up and read it. It's
Oh,
called
wow.
Blue Marlin by Lee Smith.
Okay.
Oh, my goodness. It's a little bit of a coming of age story of her own life. But she is a very prolific writer and very, very well known as a Southern writer. So anything by Lee Smith is going to be a good book. The other, I know you read Blind Your Ponies.
Yeah. Excellent book.
Well, wasn't that a great book? His book, Until They Bring the Streetcars Back. Unfortunately, that's not available on Kindle. You have to order the book from Amazon. But it's also a coming of age story that is so riveting in places. I never do this. I had to go ahead, read a few pages ahead to make sure it turned out. It was a terrific book. A terrific book. I don't know if have you heard of the book West with Giraffes?
No.
Oh, Jamie, you got to read this. It's a story. It's actually a true story. Of course, the author had to fill in the blanks, but the San Diego Zoo ordered 2 giraffes, and they came into New York through one of the worst hurricanes, imaginable, and they put them on a truck and drove them to California, and they hired this young kid to do it, and he had to modify the truck so they could stick there.
Sure.
Oh my goodness. It's a wonderful, wonderful story. I really, really recommend it. And the author she spices it up with, she tells the story of what happened on this certain day, and then she'll have a newspaper clip from the time that talks about
sure.
these 2 giraffes coming through the town.
That sounds good.
Yeah, it's really terrific. And one other, well, I know you've read Boys in the Boat.
Yeah.
That
Fantastic. Although I will say, have you seen the movie yet?
Yeah, I did.
What did you think of the movie?
Jamie, I thought that the book was too ambitious, would have been too ambitious for the movie. To me, what was so remarkable about what happened was how he got to the University of Washington. Not what happened after he got there. I mean, the fact that at 14, his parents said, "I'm sorry, we can't feed you anymore. You're on your own."
And at 10, they did the same thing, a similar thing. He had to go live in the schoolhouse. I mean,
yeah,
was exactly
how we got there was, and remember when he was in, they didn't show this, when he was in the University of Washington, he went out to work on the Hoover Dam.
Yeah.
He found they paid 50 cents more an hour if you'd hang over the side on a rope and drill. But what they did, the movie was very, very close to the book.
Yes and no. I thought that they and I understand the limitations you have when you're doing it. But the races that they did, they truncated those completely and made it seem like there was less struggle for that junior boat that made it.
Right.
And I was really disappointed with the character development. There was very little. Like, you didn't feel like you knew Joe. And like you said, I think if I were going to make the movie, I might focus more on the pre,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
we got there, because that was incredible.
Well, I was surprised that they could recreate the German Olympics the way they did.
They did a
And
nice job of that.
actually, I thought the best line in the whole movie, Jamie, was not one that was in the book. When the guy turned to Jesse Owens and said, "Are you going to show those people?" And he said, "No, I'm going to show the people back home."
Yeah, I thought that was well done, and it was a
Yeah,
nice touch. But it was also another reason where I was like, "Wait, that wasn't in the book." Like
no,
everything
that's true. That's true. That's true.
in terms of my complaints, but
Yeah.
yeah, that
Tell me
was
what you've read lately.
so. Well, let's
I'm going.
see. I'm gonna look through my list of things in there. You've seen some of these. If you watched any of the or listened to any of the podcasts, you know some of the books that I've done. One that I haven't done any podcasts on. Have you read any of the Thursday Murder Club books?
I read them all, Jamie. I read
Love
them all.
those. Oh
I
my
did too.
gosh.
I did too. Well, I have to confess. I don't know if it's allowed to say something critical on your
Sure.
podcast.
Oh yeah.
By the fourth one, they were getting a little. They were getting a little repetitive. by by the fourth, and frankly, the fourth one wasn't so much about the murder club; it was about assisted suicide.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a lot of that, but yeah, those characters though are so endearing.
They are,
Um,
yes, they are.
and it's a shame that that Betty White has passed, because I feel like she would be perfect in the role of what's her name, the
The former Secret Service.
no, not her, but her
The other one, yes, the other one who falls in love with everybody. Or
little
tries.
boy crazy. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's such a sweetheart.
yeah.
But yeah, I have really enjoyed those. One that I haven't talked about, but I recently reread. Have you ever read The Great Train Robbery by Michael Crichton?
No,
It's one
no.
of his first books, and
Uh-huh.
it's all based on a train robbery that really occurred in the 1800s in England, and everything
Right.
is taken from the trial, and so it's very close to the truth, because he has all this testimony from the trial, but it is an unbelievable heist story,
Uh-huh.
and it's really interesting, and it's not a long book, and he kind of fills it in with interesting tidbits about the time, the Victorian age, and some of the culture and the city. I found it really fascinating, and just great characters.
Yeah.
They made a horrible movie version of it in either the early 80s, late 70s, that you should never watch, because I did watch it and I thought, oh my gosh, does a total disservice to the book. But it's a great fun read that's really interesting.
One last one I want to mention to you is I don't know if you've ever heard the name Virginia Hall, a woman of no importance.
I think I have heard of that one, but I haven't read it.
It's a pretty remarkable story. Uh, she started out working for British um, special operations, whatever, in France, and then went on to work for the OSS. She's a woman she's a remarkable woman, and what's nice about it is you kind of remember she's from Maryland,
Oh,
and uh, I kind of came across her name in my career as somebody that, and when I read the book, I understood why. A remarkable story of what she did behind the lines in France during World War II.
oh, that sounds like something I'd really like.
She she started out. She was determined to be in the Foreign Service, but a woman in the Foreign Service was not going to happen in the late 30s. But she did work in the State Department, and she was posted abroad, and she managed to shoot her foot off in a hunting accident. So she did everything she did um, uh, for the French Resistance with a
Prosthetic foot.
prosthetic foot,
Wow.
including when the Germans got close to her, Jamie. The Germans got close to her. She spent 3 days hiking over the Pyrenees into Spain to escape them.
Oh my
With a
gosh.
prosthetic foot. Actually, it's kind of moving. My niece married a Jewish fellow, and he read somewhere that that's the way a lot of Jews escaped France and escaped Europe, was to hike over the Pyrenees. So not 6 months ago, he decided he wanted to go do that. So he did.
Oh wow.
Went to France, walked over the Pyrenees into Spain.
Um, did you read Under the Scarlet Sky?
Say that again. No.
Under the Scarlet Sky. Let me make sure I got that right. That is a true story. That was also amazing, and there was lots Beneath a Scarlet Sky by Mark Sullivan. Mm-hmm. World War II, and there are lots of stories. The main character who he interviewed and wrote the book from these interviews helped Jews escape Italy and into Switzerland. And they had to go over whatever mountains they had to go over in the winter, and he was a guide to help them do that. And the stories were just unbelievable. And you can't believe this guy also ended up being for the Italian resistance, but he had joined the German army, so that because if you were an Italian young guy, you were going to get thrown in either the Italian army or the German army.
Yeah.
But the Italian army people got sent to the front. So
they did. They got sent to Russia.
Yeah. And so he ended up being like he staffed a general and was his driver. So he ended up going to all these crazy meetings with Mussolini and was a firsthand witness to some incredible historic events, but then would report them all to the Allies, what happened, who said what.
Yeah.
So
I'm looking forward to it. I just finished. I just finished a book about Pius XII and his role. Pius XII. Mm-hmm. It's not attractive.
No. Yeah, that was a pretty bad situation. But you will really enjoy.
Well, I'm looking at. I'll definitely look it up.
You keep thinking, I cannot believe this stuff really happened.
Yeah.
Some of it being like, I can't believe he was in this situation and witnessed this. And I mean, he witnessed Mussolini's hanging. He was there in the square. Like, I mean, just really crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about
Jamie, I want to do
Copperhead.
this again. We can spend another hour or two here.
Well, there's nothing wrong with doing another one here coming up, but I think Demon Copperhead is definitely a suggested read, and Barbara Kingsolver is a wonderful author, and so I look forward to reading all. What's fun about finding a book like this is realizing, I've got 4 or 5 more books that I haven't read by this authter. I'm really looking forward to it. So,
yeah.
All right. Well,
it's so good to see you and to hear your voice. Hugs to Kate and the kids, and
the same to yours. Same to yours.